Hey everybody, it's Romania Black, and we are on Heaven Official's Blessing. Apparently Arc 2. We finished Arc 1, and now we're starting Book 2, the second part of this series, and I'm so nervous because I don't know where we're going. I feel my gut instinct is that we're going to go do a flashback because that seems very Modao Zushi. Modao Zushi, which is the previous MXTX work that I've read, they had a big section. Although, honestly, this whole first part went a lot longer than the very first part of Modao Zushi. Modao Zushi has like a preface, and then they do a giant arc, and then it goes back and forth, and it's kind of crazy. Here, we've done a whole big section setting up Hua Cheng and Shilian's relationship, setting up some of the heavenly officials, setting up a lot of mystery about Shilian, and now we're doing, the arc is called the God-pleasing Crown Prince, which seems like Shilian, and it seems like Shilian in his former heyday, so I feel like we're going to do a flashback and go through Shilian, because we've got a lot of ground of unknown with Shilian. In the timeline, we've established his first ascension. We've established the White Calamity, that he fell at some point. And then there's like a 500-year gap where we know nothing. And then we have the whole deal with the Gilded Banquet. We have Qi Rong, and we have Feng Shen and Mu Qing's kind of maybe involvement, or Feng Shen at least. And then we have like a 100-year gap. And then we have Banyu. So there's a lot of gray area that we've not even explored. And I get a little impatient because I'm like, well, how are we going to cover all this ground? And then I realize, oh, this is only volume 2 of 8. So we've got lots of ground to cover. It's fine. But yeah, so I am excited. I've got basically the rest of this book planned out. I'm going to be traveling for holiday, so I am going to be looking at the Manwa Chapter 85 today alongside chapters 58 and 59, which don't seem like a lot, but it's 22 pages, and the last section that took me 2 hours was 25 pages. So I feel like that's still a lot of ground to cover, so I'm going to be doing chapters 58 and 59 for this week, and the Manhua chapter. And then since I'm going to be out of town traveling, I'm going to basically have a week where I can't record, and I'm not ahead. So I'm going to have to record ahead to be on track with everything. And so I'm actually going to be recording probably the next 2 parts a little bit early. So if I don't have a lot of comments to talk about, don't worry, over Thanksgiving break, I'll have lots of time to read comments. And then when we get start volume 3, I'll have a lot. But basically, the part after this, I'm going to do chapters 60 through 65, which is a big chunk, but it is one part. The book makes it one giant part. So I'm like, a lot of stuff's going to go down, because that's going to be a long section, I feel. But that's why I'm recording ahead, to give me a lot of time to read it. But it seems like it would be worth it. Probably need to do it. So yeah, so that's going to be a big old chunk that I'm going to be looking at. And then chapter 60 through 65, that's going to be part 26, aka part 17 of this review. And then I'm going to finish out this novel, chapter 66 through 68, which is part 27 in the book, the week after. So I won't have a Manhwa chapter with parts 66 and 68. We'll just do 2 Manhwa chapters when we get to it. We are in volume 3. So that's what we got to do. But it'll be 2 Manhwa chapters. That'll be fun. So yeah. I don't know what's going to happen. We technically have literally 11 chapters left of this book, and I'm assuming it's going to be a flashback. Now the question is all of book 2 a flashback with Shilian? I feel like it is. How far back are we going to go? Are we going to start from the White Calamity and his first ascension? Are we going to cut? It would make sense to cut immediately to Qi Rong and his past with Feng Shen and the Gilded Banquet and everything. But I'm like, are we going to go back and forth in between? What are we going to find out? Are we going to get all the backstory with Feng Shen and Mu Qing with him? There's so many questions I have, and I don't want answers because I'm going to find them out in the book. But I am really, really excited to get into the last third these next few weeks of volume 2 and then dive into volume 3. As much as I love this cover, I've seen the cover of volume 3. It's them in the ocean, whatever that leads to. And so I'm ready to talk about it, right? So yeah, we'll just find out. It'll be fine. But yeah, I'm not going to waste any more time. We're going to start, I'm not going to waste any more time, and we're just going to go ahead and start this part. We are going to start chapters 58 and 59 of Heaven Official's Blessing. And we are going to do that here in 3, 2, 1, and let's go. Book 1 end. Book 2, The God-Pleasing Crown Prince. Chapter 58, On the Martial Deity Avenue, an awe-inspiring first impression. Oh, and that's so clever. They do, like, right as Feng Shen is going to go down and crush Qirong, we cut to a flashback, and a sword thrusts down and penetrates the heart of a ghost, killing it dead on the ground. By heaven's blessing, goats are slayed and evil is subdued. Oh, So that's, but we know as the audience that it would not have been the case. Would not have been the case if he had actually slung the sword down. It would have killed the father. Okay. Interesting. All right. Oh my God, this is like the Little Mermaid where they're like, are the fairies present? Is the cavalry present? The musicians here? The ghosts present? Where's the God-pleasing martial warrior? It's like, Ariel! It's like Shilian he's not present. No, the one who answered to Ghost hesitated and removed the horrifying mask, revealing a clean, pale face. The young man appeared to be 16 or 17. His skin and lips were light-colored, fresh and neat, and his eyes black obsidian. His hair soft and silky. He looked quiet and obedient, contrasting Oh, it's Mu Ching! Mu Ching was the ghost! Oh! His Highness the Crown Prince has left. And the ghost, she almost fainted. Oh no! How could he leave? When the grand stage is revealed, there's only a ghost, but no God. My old bones will be able to swim out of all the spit that'll come flying at me. Mu Ching, why didn't you stop him? When His Highness left, he told me to pass on the message, saying not to worry, and everything can go as planned. He will promptly return. Promptly? Well, what does he make of it? Oh my God. So was Mu Ching flounder? Is that what this is? What? Oh my God, Mu Ching. It's weird seeing Mu Ching not like he normally is, but like much more meek here and obedient. Very interesting. Oh no. The queen sent a messenger asking why the parade hasn't started. The fortuitous hour is approaching. Okay, and the fortuitous hour is the best time to perform such actions. It's basically the lucky time of the year. Oh, so are we going back to when he rescued Hua Cheng? Is that what we're going back to? Oh my God. How a headache would happen at this crucial moment. If this headache was anyone else, he would have roared with rage already. Even raising his sword to kill wouldn't be strange. But this headache happened to be his pride and joy. His precious and very, very, very distinguished son of another. Oh, so the Goshi was really attached to Shilian. Wow. He'd more likely kill himself. What? Crazy. So who's the Goshi? All right. Lord Goshi, why hasn't the parade started? The time is about to pass. Everyone outside is on edge. His form upright and tall, skin the color of wheat. His back carried a long black bow. Okay, it's Feng Shen. His lips were pressed tight. His brows knit. His brows are always knit. He's going to get wrinkles. His eyes were strong and determined. Feng Shen, where's His Highness? Oh, he was taken aback. Oh, and he got angry. And Mu Ching had already put on the ghost mask. So Fu Ching let him go. Oh, what a trickster. His Highness the Crown Prince will not disappoint you. Oh, there was no escape. Bringing out a grand stage without the God-pleasing martial warrior was death. Delaying the procession and missing a fortuitous hour is also death. Start the music, depart. Oh my God. Where is he? Oh my gosh. The warriors at the front symbolized the thorny paths of the mortal world. Immediately following were the virgin girls, especially chosen, beautiful and elegant, a basket in hands, tossing flowers in the air like fairies. So they're the celestial fairies, paving the path with blossoms and filling it with fragrance. The musicians rode in carriages of gold. It's like so extravagant. The moment the procession left, the crowds were amazed. However, no matter how glamorous, how grand, this was only the warm-up act. The grand float, a glorious stage, was about to emerge. 16 white stallions decked in gold pulled the grand stage. And on the stage was a black-clad ghost. I'm assuming this is going to be when season 3 starts. They're gonna leave season 2 on a cliffhanger with Qirong. I bet they are. I bet that's going to be it. And then they're going to start season 3 with all of this. The Goshi's heart was tense. Yet no miracles happened. The crowd broke into chatter. Okay. A monstrous mask, a 9-foot-long saber in his hand, shifted to a fighting stance. They all were like, what's going on? Why is the God-pleasing martial warrior not on stage? Has His Highness the Crown Prince arrived yet? Where's Leon, Gege? Ah! At the center of the tall platform sat a dignified, handsome man and a pale-skinned, amiable, and gracious noble woman. They were the king and queen. Not seeing the one who should be there, the queen appeared worried and gave the king a look. The king took hold of her hand, using his gaze to comfort. Telling her not to worry and to watch and see what would happen. The crowds below had no one to comfort them, though, and yelled what would happen. And crazedly, shouting so loud it almost raised the roofs. I'm sure the Goshi is getting more and more gray hairs. Mu Ching, who was on stage, was quite calm, and then clanged through his heavy saber, resting it upright before him. Performing a round of chilling slaughter, the black-clad youth impressively ended the opening act of becoming a ghost. Oh. By face and form, Mu Ching was delicate and elegant like a gentle scholar, but an impossibly heavy 9-foot-long saber was still swung like it was a feather in his hands. So yeah, he's pretty strong, right? Despite his appearances. Okay. The cultivators playing ghosts leapt on the stage and were instantly defeated and chased off stage. However, the people didn't come to watch the ghosts causing havoc, and so it was just a noise, and they were just still asking where Shilian is. Oh, defeat evil. Oh. Upon the towering platform, a furious voice shouted, "Where's my cousin? What the hell? Who wants to see and watch this bullshit? Where the F is my cousin, the crown prince?" Oh my god. The loud voice belonged to Qi Rong. Prince Xiaojing. Oh, sure enough. Many looked up and saw a young man finely dressed in a light turquoise brocade and a necklace rush to the edge of the platform, raising his fist angrily, like he's just sitting up there waiting for him. He was no more than 15 or 16. His face pale and his brows black, rather good looking, but his face was twisted, as if he would jump off the tower at any time to punch someone. Oh my gosh. So instead he grabbed a white jade teapot and threw it. Oh, it was aimed at Mu Ching. Oh no. Oh, and he caught the teapot in his blade. Oh, and the teapot prompted a wave of cheers. Oh, Qi Rong was enraged and was going to throw something else, but the queen had ordered someone to drag him down. And the nobles were more and more grim. Man, this crowd is rioting without Shilian. Like, what the hell? Why would he disappear? Just then, a roaring cheer like a storm exploded. Louder than the cheers from before, a snow-white silhouette had descended from the sky and landed right before the black-clad ghost. The heavy white dress fluttered and covered the grand stage in the shape of a giant flower, a golden mask hiding his face. He held a sword in one hand and the other gently flicking the foreboding sword, the resounding ringing pleasing to the ear. This gesture was serene and confident, as if the ghost meant nothing to him. The ghost slowly raised his long saber and pointed at him, and the white-clad martial warrior and hurriedly rose to his feet. "Cousin Crown Prince!" Oh my god, he is obsessed with Shilian! "Cousin Crown Prince has come!" They were stunned to silence. The entrance was like a real descent of a heavenly being, exceedingly audacious. So this is before his ascension. The fortress tower was at least over 10 meters tall, and as the imminent crown prince, whose person was worth 1,000 gold, still jumped down from it. Oh, the Goshi's gonna be freaked out! Oh my god. They had thought a god had truly descended. When they recovered from their shock, fervor filled the veins. The crowd went hysterical, applauding with intensity. Qi Rong too was shouting, leading the crowd in mad applause. Wow, his ability to manipulate. Shouting until his voice was hoarse and clapping until his hands were red. The king and queen shared a look, smiling and applauded too. Look at our son. The rest of the nobles eased their brows and sighed a breath of relief before joining. Like they were like worried for a second. Upon the grand stage, two forms, one black and one white, faced each other, each with their own weapon in hand. The god and ghost would finally face off. Seeing that everything had worked out, the Goshi finally relaxed his shoulders and mounted the towering platform. Okay, Goshi, how did you come up with such an exhilarating entrance? How exciting. Oh yeah, the king's like, you came up with this, right? He's like, oh, sure. Yeah, we totally planned this. Oh, this lowly servant didn't come up with it. I'm afraid it's His Highness the Crown Prince's own idea. That mischievous child, to jump from such a height without a word of warning. I almost stood up in fright. He couldn't help but lace his words with pride. My Lady Queen can be at ease. The martial might of His Highness the Crown Prince is extraordinary. Tens of meters is nothing to him, and even with towers that are many times higher, he can easily mount and easily jump with his eyes closed. Thanks to the teachings of the Goshi. Who is this Goshi? It's nothing. It's nothing. Darling of the heavens is divinely gifted. It's the fortune collected for 3 lifetimes that gave this lowly servant the chance to become his teacher. So he's pretty old. I have premonition that with His Highness the Crown Prince's presence, today will go down history as the most impressive martial match of the God-pleasing ceremony. Wow. I hope that's the case. Interesting. Okay, in the heavenly procession, the God-pleasing martial warrior and the ghost were the 2 most important roles. Both must be young men exceedingly skilled in martial arts, especially the God-pleasing martial warrior. The presentation and make of his costume were strict, transcendently glamorous. After dressing, the weight of everything worn came to be at 50 pounds of just material. So yeah, he's got to be strong to be able to move in it. He, before the eyes, must march around the capital many times and perform in the martial match at least for 4 hours. There must be no mistakes made throughout, and so the performer must be extraordinarily skilled. So this is when he's going to rescue Hua Cheng. But both were exceedingly talented. So yeah, establishing Mu Qing is pretty talented as well. Yeah. Your Majesty, he's a young trainee from the Royal Holy Pavilion. His name is Mu Qing. I see that child is rather skilled in fighting, just a bit weaker than my son. Maybe about the same level as Feng Shen. Okay, so he was a trainee. Okay, all right, we'll talk about this when we get to the discussion. Yeah. Okay, he didn't agree that he was as strong as Feng Shen, though. Oh. He's just a bit weaker. He's not just a bit weaker, far weaker. Not just anyone can compare to cousin. Oh, Shi Rong was saying that. Not anybody can compare to cousin Crown Prince. Oh, and the queen patted his head. And the rest of the nobles all laughed. Little Rong clings to his cousin. If he doesn't praise him for a day, he's miserable. Oh. And then that's shouting of fight, fight, kill him. Slay the evil. Oh. And then Shi Rong, his hands around his mouth like a trumpet. You can easily knock him down, show him how it's done. Oh. Oh, but okay. Technically, during the heavenly parade, the martial match was a performance for pleasing the gods, and at the most, one should only use 1/7 of their power, ceasing after sword's touch. However, with the strike he received just now, the sword in his hand almost flew out. His opponent had used all of his might. Oh. Oh, he slashed at him again. Oh, he's being serious. Oh. Well, this is more exciting than fake play, Shilian thought. Okay. What kind of saber is this? What strength you must need? Oh. The 9-foot-long saber had snapped out of his hand by a long, slender sword, and it flew towards a stone pillar and became embedded in it. Oh my gosh. His sword shook and the flicker of his finger on the blade again. The golden mask came soft chuckling. You fought well, but you still lost. Ooh. But his fist gripped tighter. Oh. Oh, and that's when shocked Shilian lowered his sword and looked up and saw a blurry shadow falling rapidly from the city wall. Oh, wait! Oh, so when he threw the sword and it struck the pillar, did it cause Hua Cheng to fall off? Oh! He didn't have time to think. In a flash, he tipped his feet and pushed off the ground, leaping. He surged and flew, his sleeves fluttering open like wings of a butterfly. Oh! And landed gracefully like a feather. Holding tight was the person. In his arm was a child, head wrapped full of bandages, dirty and unkempt, curled in his hold and watching him dazzledly. Oh my gosh! Oh, there's so much with this one chapter already. Oh my gosh. Okay. All right. I've saved a lot for the discussion, so I want to go back and take some notes before we move on to chapter 59. Oh, buddy. Okay. So, chapter 59, on the martial deity avenue, an awe-inspiring first impression too. So the first impression is Hua Cheng's first impression of Shilian, and vice versa. The child was no older than 7 or 8, and quite the gaunt and small creature. So if Shilian's 17 and Hua Cheng's 7 or 8, so there's like a 10-year difference. So Shilian's the elder. Shilian's like 10 years older than Hua Cheng. How cute. Aww. His little body was shaking uncontrollably, his arms like a newborn animal. From that mess of bandages wrapped peeked a large eye, black in color, reflecting the silhouette of a snow-white figure within, watching him unblinkingly as if he could no longer see anything else. Oh. Okay. His heart sank. In his peripheral vision, he saw lying on the ground not far away a golden object. The golden mask that hid his face had fallen. Shilian had landed in the middle of the martial deity avenue, and the ceremonial parade was miles behind him, procession not having made it that far yet. The sudden commotion broke the steady march of the warriors. The flower-tossing celestial fairies looked panicked, and the golden carriages stopped. A number of white stallions stomped their hooves and neighed in alarm, and the strings missed notes and their rhythms disrupted. Some kept going and some stopped. Without being able to coordinate their march again, the entire situation was going out of control. The crowd on both sides of the street still hadn't had a chance to react, but the king of Shanla upon the towering platform stood up immediately, watching his son's silhouette, his expression worried and grave. The moment he stood, how could the rest of the nobles remain seated? Thus they all rose to their feet in a frenzy. Goshi's bottom had just warmed his seat, but now it was cold again. He was rapidly thinking whether he needed to prostrate on all fours immediately to beg for forgiveness. And Shirong had already leapt onto the railing, his sleeves rolled up, shouting in rage. What's going on now? What's happening? Why did the procession fall into chaos? And what the hell are you useless trash doing? Did you eat all nothing but plain rice or some dumb you can't even hold your horses? Oh my God. To be fair to Shirong's behalf, it's like you can't, what was plan B? The queen's face was pale. Oh, the crowd's growing agitated and a riot was about to erupt when just then Shilian rose to his feet. Usually, the honorable crown prince was hidden deep within the palace or training at the Royal Holy Pavilion and rarely had a chance to show his face to the people. This was such a rare occasion that many couldn't help but be intrigued, their gazes all falling on him. Seeing his face, they held their breath. The young man had long brows and charming eyes, dignified and handsome, radiating nobility. His aura blindingly bright, forcing down the eyes of those looking. With the child in one arm, he raised the other with the sword in hand and pointed it to the grand stage. The ghost had been observing the situation from above the stage, and seeing that gesture, he paused for a moment before leaping to the ground. Oh! They wowed in amazement as the ghost, his form like a streak of black cloud, flew through the air to the stone pillar where the saber was deeply embedded. He pulled it from the crack and flipped again, landing in the middle of the street before the martial warrior. He instantaneously understood his intentions and came forth to cooperate, and Shilian lauded under his breath. Good, Mu Ching. Okay, now they had descended up from the stage. One black, one white, saber and sword clashed once again as he's holding the child. Oh my God, it's just the opposite of when Hua Cheng held Shilian while he fought. Oh! The ghost feigned the act to aim for the child in the warrior's arms. With both hands holding the saber, gripping it to the side, he rushed towards Shilian. They faked parrying, moves after move, strike after strike, and they leapt back onto the stage anew. While the crowd was distracted, Mu Ching used this chance to do a somersault onto the street, grabbed the mask, and dashed through procession, urging in a low voice, "Don't scramble, compose yourselves. Pretend nothing's happened and continue the march. Finished marching this round and return to the palace." So Mu Ching saved face. Okay. And then they immediately returned to their post. Shilian's left hand held him tighter, and he whispered. Just the child in his arm cried out, terrified by being struck between the weapons, "Don't be scared." Oh. Shilian was still fighting with ease. Parrying for a while, he felt the child in his hold raise his trembling arms to grab hold of his shoulders in a deadly grip, as if he was hanging on for dear life. "Don't worry, nothing will hurt you." Mu Ching, the ghost facing him, inconspicuously inclined his head, and Shilian struck. Thus, before the eyes of millions, the God-pleasing martial warrior pierced the heart of the ghost, slaying it on the spot. Oh. Mu Ching, with his ghost mask on, clutched his wound. He's like, got him there, stumbled back a few steps, and with a thud fell to the ground, has stopped moving. Chirong laughed out loud, applauding. "Dead, he's dead, Cousin Crown Prince has slayed the ghost dead." While all this was happening, the magnificent heavenly procession had continued to march, and soon moved onto the path back to the palace. Because of how well the act was saved and how the unexpected improvised act was exhilarating to watch, not only did the people not complain, but rather their excitement grew even stronger. Countless within the crowd were shouting, "Your Highness," hollering, "God," and following behind the grand stage, thousands upon millions rushing to the palace. A few of the generals had to send out many more troops of warriors and soldiers to block the overly excited people. In the end, they still couldn't hold them back, and the crowd broke through, pushing themselves towards the palace gates. The king of Shanla called from atop the towering platform, "Guard, warriors." Hundreds within the procession had all re-entered the palace, and the crimson gates closed soundly shut after the ground stage. Oh. Their cheers ringing to the heavens. The white-clad, God-pleasing martial warrior and the black-clad ghost threw their weapons on the ground with two clanking sounds before collapsing heavily to the ground. Shilian was covered in sweat and ripped open layers and layers of his elegant costume before exhaling deeply. "That was close. Too close. I'm exhausted." Hua Cheng removed his heavy ghost mask and let out a long breath silently, but didn't complain about being tired. When he looked over, he saw Shilian was still holding on to the young child and frowned wordlessly. Feng Shen, on the other hand, called out as he followed, "Your Highness, what are you doing bringing that child in too?" That young child was lying on Shilian's chest, his small body frozen and unmoving, afraid to even breathe loudly. Shilian sat up. "What was I to do, throw him back onto the streets? It's a mess out there. Such a tiny creature, he'd get trampled to death." He held up the small child and patted his head. "How old are you, little guy?" "Oh my God!" He didn't blink. He uttered no sounds. "How did you come to fall earlier?" "Your Highness, the child probably doesn't dare to speak. He's obviously scared witless," Hua Cheng said. He patted the head of the young child, but his unresponsiveness made him lose interest. So he stopped patting. So silly. "Feng Shen, go find someone to take him out through the side doors when you get a chance. See if he's injured. His head is wrapped in bandages." "All right, give him here." Shilian held the child and passed him over, but before he could do so, Feng Shen said, "Your Highness, why haven't you let go?" "I did let go?" Shilian was puzzled, but when he looked down, he laughed exasperately. It turns out the child, who was still gripping tightly into his clothes, refusing to let go. "Oh, okay." A few were taken aback and started laughing out loud. While training at the Royal Holy Pavilion, so many devotees, men and women alike, tried their hardest to get a glimpse of Shilian, whether it be out of curiosity or devotion. But when they'd seen him once, they'd want to see him again. If they could train next to him, then even better. They couldn't believe that a child at such a young age would also be the same. Guarding the grand stage were many young trainees of the Royal Holy Pavilion, and they all snickered. "Your Highness's child doesn't want to leave." "Is that right? That won't do. I've got my own things to do." "Go home, little kid." "Oh!" Hearing this, that child finally loosened his grip, letting go of his clothes, and Feng Shen picked him up. Even when the person holding him now was now Feng Shen, the child was still staring at Shilian with his large dark eye, looking as if he was possessed. Many who were witnessing this started muttering silently, noting that intense stare. Shilian, however, wasn't even looking at the child anymore, and only spoke to Feng Shen directly. "Don't pick him up like you're picking up trash. You're scaring him." Feng Shen put the child back down on the ground. "Enough joking around. The Goshi's freaking out. Your Highness better think about how you're going to face him later." Hearing this, everyone stopped laughing. An hour later at the Royal Holy Pavilion, inside the hall. Okay. Their faces were clouded. The deputy Goshi and 3 other deputy Goshi. Their faces were clouded. Hua Cheng was kneeling before them. Shilian was also kneeling. But before him was nothing but a golden statue of the Emperor. "Ah, Your Highness, Your Highness." "Present!" Ah! "Do you know that in the history of Shanla, having held so many Shangzhuan heavenly ceremonial processions, never once did the grand stage only circle the capital thrice. Thrice! Every ritual of the heavenly ceremonial procession, every decoration in every place had a meaning behind it. To have the grand stage circle the capital once symbolized the kingdom's prayer for the peace and happiness for 1 year. Thus, however many rounds the grand stage made meant however many years another such grand ceremony needed to not take place. Not only did this signify good fortune, it saved money. Having only made 3 rounds, Didn't that mean the kingdom would only be protected for 3 years? And after he ascended for 3 years, that's when the calamity happens. Oh, okay. The worst thing on top of that was the golden mask had fallen mid-ritual. Since ancient times, the people of Shanley had believed that the spiritual aura of a person resided upon the 5 facial features. The spirit was on their face, and the best must be offered to the heavens. Thus, in the midst of the ceremony, the martial warrior must wear a golden mask to hide their features, because his face could only be appreciated by the gods, and mortals have no right to see it. Oh, okay. The God-pleasing martial warriors of the past circled the capital at minimum 5 times, at most 15 or 16 times. You can do 50 with your eyes closed, 100 even, but you killed yourself dead at 3. Why didn't you just kill me, your master, first? Now look at you. Her Highness the Crown Prince is going down in history, dragging me along with you. But he looked at ease. Goshi, why didn't you look at it this way? If the child had fallen to his death, with no one to catch him, spilling blood on the path of the procession, wouldn't that be equally ominous? Wouldn't the parade still have come to a stop? At the very least, the ceremony ended decently, and it was the best case scenario. Let's just call what happened an accident. Oh, you child! Anyone could have caught him. Even if the catch is off and he breaks an arm, he wouldn't die. You could have just marched forward a few steps, performed a little flashier, and everyone would have forgotten whatever had fallen and moved on. Oh. Goshi, you understand as well as I. Under those circumstances, no one else but me could have reacted as fast, and there was no second person who could have caught him without injuries. Let him fall, there'd be 1 dead. Catch him, and there'd be 2 dead. His words were confident and self-assured, and the Goshi also knew what he had said was true. He couldn't refute it, but seeing him kneel before the statue of God, looking as well as if nothing was the matter, he was angry, amused, and all proud. Oh, he could, before his precious darling disciple, he couldn't get angry. He could only pull at his own hair. Another thing! This disciple's listening. You did well today on stage, but no matter how well you performed, you can't just suddenly change things up right before the start without a warning. Both majesties were terrified by your act today. Do you know what would happen if we missed the fortuitous hour? Goshi, in regard to this, hadn't I already asked for your permission before today? You asked already before today? When? Oh. Mu-Ching? Oh, so he planned this out and Mu-Ching. Oh no, is that it? No! Oh, damn it! So he said he had asked permission. And Mu-Ching was like, oh yeah, he's totally fine with it. Oh, what? No! Damn it, no! These chapters will buy really, really quickly. No! Okay, all right. Okay, we will need to, I'm going to look at the Manhua chapter. I'm going to go back and take notes. And then we're going to come back. And there's a lot in these 2 chapters. And we need to talk about it. Huh. Oh, gosh. I'm really glad that the next set of chapters I'm reading are long chapters, are a long set, because this went by way too quick. But I committed. I was like, I'm going to just do 58 and 59. Why are you ending on a cliffhanger? I didn't feel like screaming at the end of that cliffhanger because I'm probably going to go ahead this weekend and read the next set because I'm not going to be able to wait. I'm just not. It's just not going to happen. So yeah, I'm not going to be able to wait. So I've already decided that I'm using the excuse that I'm going to be out of town and I need to record ahead to go ahead and do this. So yeah, that's where we're at. But yeah, oh my gosh. So, okay. So yeah, these chapters, even though they were relatively short chapters, there is so much going on, and going back through them, I was like, oh my gosh, we're just setting up all the comparisons and contrasts for how this story has started. Like we've gone back to the beginning. This is before Shilian ascends. This is essentially as he rescues this is before his ascension, like as he's rescuing Hua Cheng. So we're back to the I wondered how far, if we did a flashback, how far we would go back. We've gone back to the very beginning. We've gone back to Mu Qing and Fengxian working with Shilian as the people, like, Fengxian's his guard. So we need to establish a lot of things. There's a lot of things that have to do with, like, characters and personalities and traits. Lots of different things to kind of build up and talk about. I also had comments from the last video that I didn't even get to, because I was so excited for these chapters, and I was so ready to dive in after waiting with that cliffhanger with Qi Rong and Shilian, that I was like, I totally skipped like 4 comments that I had. So I guess we might as well talk about the comments and the Manhwa and the pre-stuff before we dive into these chapters. We might as well talk about that, right? Because I have some pictures that I'll show you guys up here all over from the Manhwa, but we might as well talk about let's do the Manhwa first. So the Manhwa chapter 85, I am sad that after this week, we're going to basically be doing 2 weeks without the Manhwa, 3 technically, so 3 weeks without the Manhwa, which is sad, but the good thing is we'll have both chapters 86 and 87 when we're like diving into volume 3. So that'll be fun. We can go back and see those chapters, and that'll be a good deal. But yeah, so the Manhwa is really great. I love the Windmaster and how Star Ember draws them. They're just their cranky expression, and even the gestures, like the Windmaster's throwing their hands like here, there, and everywhere. And Shilian, man, these chapters do establish that Shilian is a very handsome man, and he is very handsome, even in covered in filth. Star Ember's like, I gotta make him hot either way. But I love the camaraderie of the Windmaster and Shilian in these chapters when they're underground, and just them throwing the dice and trying to get out there, ending up with the cannibals. So we got the worm and the cannibal in this one chapter, which is great, because that means in the next installment we'll have 2 chapters, and one of them is going to be when Shilian arrives back in Hua Cheng's lap. Compared to these chapters here, how the tables have turned. How the tables have turned. Just so much to talk about. But I love the way the Windmaster is drawn in this. I love how Shilian's drawn. They still have those cute little chippy cat faces when they're transporting to the cannibals. And it all being like green and foresty is kind of different than I imagined it. I also love that this entire time the Windmaster's been dressed in this scantily clad like sheer fabric, and is just roaming around with his like body like on display. It's great. But I love that he's like, working with you is exciting, Your Highness. And Shilian's like gives this awkward laugh like, what can we do? Shilian's so different. We'll talk about his character, so different than how he was as a 17-year-old. So different. And it's so MXTX does a beautiful job of painting a portrait of how someone is when they're young, and then you see Shilian now, who's so seasoned and jaded, and like it's very Doctor Who, like the doctor that's been through everything, and he's just so hardened by what he's experienced. But the Windmaster, we do get the nick on the Windmaster's face. I was expecting Star Ember to draw the Windmaster like almost like more enraged and angry and kind of grisly and ugly with how mad he was, but Star Ember cannot make the Windmaster not look elegant, so that didn't happen. Instead, the Windmaster just has like little tiny like kind of like cartoonish like little vein popping out on his cheek, and has the fan, and then makes gracefully and graciously makes the cannibals fly up into the air. The cannibals are all drawn hot. I'm like, they're eating meat, the flesh of other people. How many people come through there? Why are they so ripped? But yeah, that's basically the Manhwa chapter. It's a fun time. But we do get an image in the actual chapters themselves this time. Last time we didn't get an image. We do get one in this set of chapters. It is, of course, of our beautiful Crown Prince, looking rather dashing. Look at that. Look at him. Looking graceful there with his mask. Very elegant, right? And all the clothing. And it's basically, you can see it's the same outfit and pose that was on the cover of him catching it. And if you open up, I think if you had opened up the cover or had gone all the way around, wasn't it that the mask flew off? I thought the mask flew off at some point. I think it's in the cover. Yeah. There's the overall picture. So we're back to the cover photo where it's Shilian catching Hua Cheng, and the mask flies off in the moment. And it's like a bunch of butterflies. Oh, there's so much to talk about in this chapter. So much to talk about in these chapters. But first, I have a few comments that I want to say before we begin, right? So, Molly MIGH talked about Chi-Rong's relationship and the difference between obsession and devotion. And we talked a little bit about this in the reaction last week, but I do think it's important, especially with these chapters, that it gets brought to light that the idea of obsession versus devotion, that Chi-Rong was so obsessed with Shilian and like was fanboying and just totally idolizing Shilian. Right? And it becomes, you can see from these chapters that we just read how unhealthy that is and how much when Shilian eventually let him down, how much that broke Chi-Rong and just completely ruined him, and how, you know, he just kind of devolved from that point and it turned into hate. But Chi-Rong, his is not an obsession, it's a devotion. And I think that that is different in a way. From right now, from these chapters, it may not seem that way because, you know, Hua Cheng in that moment, he just has that one solitary black eye leaning out. We don't see the other eye, but the solitary black eye, right, that's looking out from the bandages, just staring at Shilian. And so it may seem like an obsession right now, and they kind of, the guards and the trainees at the Holy Pavilion kind of joke about it. They're like, oh, he's just another obsessed person like anybody else. But we see later on that Hua Cheng is devoted. And there's another series that I've watched in the past called Vinland Saga. And in that series, there's a whole concept and conversation about devotion versus love. And devotion is different than pure love in that series. In that series, they say that devotion is the idea that you choose to love one over another. It's not pure love like you love everything. No, devotion is you are actively choosing to love one person or one thing over others. And that's Hua Cheng in a nutshell. He has chosen to devote his time and love to Shilian over everyone else. Everyone else, don't care. Shilian, love of my life. And from this moment, you can see like he saved him, right? Well, we'll talk about that though. Although maybe Hua Cheng remembers how Shilian was in this moment. Maybe not. We'll talk about it. But you could tell it was like love at first sight, that Hua Cheng saw Shilian and it was like, that's it. He's the one. But what I like about Molly's comment is that unlike Chi-Rong, who put Shilian on this pedestal and held him up to these high expectations, and when he doesn't meet them, he, you know, devolves into hatred, Hua Cheng seems like he is totally fine with Shilian's flaws, and he actually encourages him, being like, hey, you're doing your best. You are just human at the time. It's okay. You're fine. Be yourself. And so I think that's really important, that he loves him despite all these flaws, right? Whereas the flaws are what caused Chi-Rong to hate Shilian. So I think that's rather interesting. Shizun talks about that I mentioned in the last video that androphobia is a fear of men. Well, gynophobia is a fear of women, and Fengshen has it. Fengshen has a fear of women. It is very apparent. So thank you, Shizun, for giving me the name of that phobia. And then finally, SQQLBH314 talks about how it seems like Shilian's choice of the Puchi Shrine back from the start of Volume 1 may have been because of the red maple leaves. Like when they were traveling on the cart, you see all the red maple leaves surrounding him, and he's like, oh, I like this place because it reminds him of home. And it reminds him of home back when Shanla was in the height of its prime, right? And so that's why he wanted to make the shrine there, because it reminded him of home and of the maple leaves that are no longer on the mountain of the Holy Pavilion. So I liked that. And then also Chi-Rong and Shanla, they knew about the mausoleum. I thought this was really important to point out with their characters. They knew about the mausoleum. They knew about the stones that were inside the walls and the pearls, and how priceless MXTX describes them. Like one pearl alone would feed you for the rest of your life. So the whole tunnel and everything is lined with them. But yet, Shilian and Chi-Rong, neither of them at any point in time have gone to that mausoleum and stolen from there. So despite Chi-Rong being this savage ghost and being as crass and foul as he is, he's never taken from that. And he could have. I mean, you'd be asking what would Chi-Rong do with money? He's a ghost. But he could use it to influence others, but he never did. And Shilian, for 800 years of wandering as a scrap collector, never went back and took anything from the mausoleum, despite them both knowing how to get there. So to me, that shows that obviously for Shilian, he has utmost respect for that place because his parents are buried there. But even Chi-Rong, oddly enough, has some level of respect or reverence where he doesn't want to steal from it. So there's something that adds to Chi-Rong's character there, and I thought that was really, really cool to point out. So thank you. But yeah, where do we even start with these chapters? Where do we even start? I feel like I took a lot of notes for chapters 58, and then I started to take notes on chapter 59, and then I got to the end of a page, and I just have it pulled up here on the screen, being like, I'll just read from it too. But man, the festival. So we go back to the beginning. We're back to the very beginning where we started this whole story at, right? I love that MXTX is tying back to the start and being like, here were some crumbs I gave you. Now let's elaborate on that. I set up the whole festival, and we set up the idea that they only went around 3 times instead of 4. And we set up the idea that Shilian saved this kid and it threw everything off. But let's elaborate on that now. We know enough about Shilian now, enough about Hua Cheng now, and enough about these characters. Let's go back and talk about it, right? So we have 800 years ago. That's where this is taking place at Shanla. And now it's great because we can go back and expand upon it because we know Chi-Rong now. So now we know Chi-Rong's backstory, so we can include him in the story. So it's something that I love that MXTX is doing in this, and it's going back to these moments we've already visited, but now that we have more and more context and more knowledge about the characters involved, we can expand upon it. And I feel like this series is going to keep doing that, and I'm excited because that means it's not only going to refresh me to the information that's happened, but we're also going to add to it. So that's great. So we have the Shangjian Festival. All right. And according to the book itself, it is on the 15th and last day of the Lunar New Year, and it celebrates celestial heavens, right? Because these people in Shanlo, they worship the Heavenly Emperor, Junwu. So there we go. And in it, a ghost is slain. Ha-ha! So in it, a ghost is slain, and evil is subdued. All right. Isn't that funny? All these mean old ghosts. So what I want to do is do kind of the past versus the present, because there's a lot of differences. There's a lot of differences. And I think it's worth going over the past versus the present, right? So, I mean, the thing that I don't really feel like we need to elaborate on Whiteboard Coon, but it's the idea of the ghost being slain and that evil is subdued if we do so. So, I'm going to go ahead and write it up. But I feel like in the past, it's the idea that, oh, if we kill a ghost, then it's victory and good. And we have, like, I cannot tell you how much I love this chapter starting out with. We ended the last chapter with Shilian slamming down the sword, and we start this one with the sword going and killing the ghost. That's so perfect. That is like a perfect start. I'm like, MXTX, narratively, it's like, you just, as somebody that writes, you're just like, that's so perfect. It's beautiful. And I almost hope, I said in the reaction, I thought maybe season 2 ends with Shilian lowering the sword down on Chi-Rong. But God, I really hope now that, and maybe it does, maybe season 3 would start out with the sword like a recap, and at the end of the recap, it's Shilian slamming down Feng Shin, and then right when he slams down, we cut to the start of the episode, and that's where the festival is. That would be amazing. If y'all could do that, producers of this show that do not know what I'm saying, if y'all could do that, that'd be great. That'd be wonderful. But we have that idea of the killing the ghost equals victory or good. Being like, I think it's important to put the killing the ghost. But as we've just seen in the last chapters before we start this, we have Chi-Rong versus Shilian. And is it victory? Like, honestly, if Shilian kills the father, slices out his tongue, he can yank Chi-Rong out. Sure, he will be able to kill the ghost, but is that victory? What does that do to Shilian? It only makes him suffer more, right? And it's also the idea that in this, they just stab the ghost in the heart with the sword. But we know as the audience, that's not enough. It's not enough for Shilian to just rip out the tongue and stab Chi-Rong. No, once he pulls him out, he has to find the ashes. So it's just that idea of taking something that already has a more complicated existence and just simplifying it And does simplifying it do good? And I think in this case, no, it does not do good. And plus, we've established that a lot of these ghosts have baggage, and they were once human that just fell or had lots of pain and suffering happen to them. But here it's like, they're evil. Kill them all. It's like, yikes. So there's that. But yeah, it was instantly like the Little Mermaid, though, where it was like, I feel like the Goshi that's in charge of Shanla is just like, I feel like the Goshi is like Sebastian the Crab, and he's like, where is Shilian? And then Mu Ching comes out like Flounder, and he's like, oh, well, I just ran off somewhere, and he's like, Shilian! I feel like I'm glad my Disney movie continuity has not ended with Heaven Official's blessing. We're back. Although the king himself does not seem like King Triton. I don't know. I think it is worth noting that the Guoshi, everyone is obsessed with Shilian. Everyone is obsessed with him. So in the past, everyone is obsessed with Shilian. They think he is the bee's knees. He is the best thing since sliced bread. Whereas now, Shilian is the joke of the three realms. How the mighty have fallen indeed. Although, by the end of the last few chapters, everybody's starting to be like, oh, well, we can't talk about Shilian being a joke. But they still think that. They just can't talk about it because they think Junwoo will get mad. And there we are. But yeah, everybody's obsessed with him to the point where the Guoshi, he said if it had been anybody else that had not been there on time, he could have killed them and wouldn't have blinked an eye. But the fact that it's Shilian, he's like, he would feel so bad that he'd rather kill himself than reprimand him. That's insane. Like the idea that he would easily be like, well, anybody else that's not worthy, like Shilian, yeah, get rid of him. But Shilian, oh no. He is the crown prince. Like the devotion and obsession with Shilian is kind of insane, right? It's kind of insane. And it's no wonder. I'm glad that Shilian, we see him and he's definitely a 17-year-old. And he's definitely the product of his raising to an extent. We'll talk about it. But I am glad that Shilian is not like a cold and arrogant. He's a little bit arrogant, a little bit. But he's not, we'll talk about it, but he's not like arrogant to the point of like pompous, right? Shilian is not pompous. And I'm glad because all these people obsessing over you and telling you that you're amazing, it would be so easy to get a big head and a huge inflated ego and think that you are better than everyone else. And that does not seem to be the case with Shilian. So I'm glad that that's the situation. But that does bring up a lot of questions, right? That does bring up some questions, okay? Like, where was Shilian? Where was Shilian during all this? Why was he late? Was the grand entrance planned? Did he intend for it? Was he like, oh yeah, I'm going to make this grand entrance? We'll talk about Mu Ching at the very end of this chapter, at the end of chapter 59, because I think I have an idea. I went back and reread the chapter, and I think I have an idea of what's going on, but I want to wait till the end of the chapter, so we'll come back to this. But yeah, where was Shilian? Was the grand entrance planned? And then did he not want to participate, or was he just running late? Was he running late? I'm going to put this on here. Was he running late or was hesitant to join? Because there is a point in the last chapter when he's on the Holy Pavilion Mountain and he's going to the mausoleum where Shilian says that at the time when he was told to cultivate and it was part of his duty, he didn't have fun with it. So I wondered if Shilian, thinking that this whole ceremony was part of his duties, was not really into it, or was just like, oh, do I have to do this? Okay. Or was like hesitating with it. If there was some kind of that to it and he just like was late or just wasn't sure if he was going to do it, and then at the last minute was like, okay, I'm going to start doing it. I'll show up and then jump down onto the platform because he's 17 and he's spry and thinks he can do that, right? So there are some questions of why Shilian was not there on time to begin with, but I think I have an idea that we'll talk about at the end of this discussion. I think I have an idea of why that was the case. Again, I'm going to probably posit a lot of theories. Just don't spoil me. Please don't spoil me. Let me wallow in my ignorance, because in a few days I'm going to be reading this again. So we're going to read the next section in a few days. I'm sorry you have to wait. But yeah, so anyway, we get a bit on Mu Qing in this, right? We get a lot on Mu Qing, actually, which is cool. But we find out that Mu Qing, he was a trainee at the Holy Pavilion. So he was a trainee that likely Shilian spotted and was like, you're really strong. I've been training with you, and I think you'd be great as a deputy. How about you follow me and come live at the palace? I assume that that's exactly what happened. And I feel like Mu Qing's always looked down upon nobility because he kind of came from the bottom and rose his way up through the ranks. So I'm sure he was like, sure, I'll go live in your palace where things are immensely better for me, but I'm not gonna like it. I'm gonna be a tsundere about it, you know? But it's funny, he's described as kind of quiet and meek at first, whereas in the present, Mu Qing is not meek and he's not quiet. Mu Qing is very outspoken, and will have none of your BS. Yeah, I feel like back in the past, Mu Qing kind of tolerated a lot and was quiet because he was working his way up through the ranks. Well, now that he started from the bottom and now he's here in the heavenly realm, he's like, I'm not going to be quiet. I'm going to call y'all out if you're spouting BS. No. Like, he just does not seem like he goes with the flow or puts on any pretense. Why would he? He came from nothing and rose his way up. So he kind of knows, the way that the society works, whether he likes it or not, right? So there's that. But with Mu Qing, it's interesting. He says that he's clearly strong, right? Because otherwise he wouldn't be in the position to play the ghost for the festival. So he clearly is very, very strong, right? And he says that Shilian, he let him go. Maybe he forgot something. Who knows? And the Goshi seems like he's okay. He seems like he's an okay person. We'll talk about him here in a minute. But Feng Shen shows up. We'll talk about the Goshi here in a second. My notes are a little out of order. Feng Shen shows up. Feng Shen seems very similar to how he does now, but he is extremely loyal to a fault to Shilian. Like, he sticks up for Shilian hardcore. He sticks up for Shilian like nobody's business and is like, oh no, we've got this covered. Like Feng Shen shows up, he's super loyal. He's not happy with Mu Qing, who has the mask on. I love that we don't see Mu Qing's expression. Feng Shen's like, what do you mean he got away? And he looks over to Mu Qing, and Mu Qing's already got the mask on, doesn't want to give anything away to Feng Shen, probably because he knows Feng Shen can read him out. But he says that Shilian won't disappoint them. He is just as taken with Shilian as everyone else is. Mu Qing seems to be the only one that's not really taken with Shilian, which is kind of fun. He seems almost jealous of Shilian. Like, he's maybe jealous of his position and what he can get away with that he knows from his upbringing that nobody else can get away with. So it seems like Mu Qing has some jealousy there, which is going to be fun to explore. But Feng Shen is loyal to a fault and thinks Shilian won't disappoint. And again, that ties back to Shilian telling Hua Cheng, being like, don't think I'm perfect. He's like, I'm going to disappoint you. I've disappointed everybody. You wouldn't be the first. So it's interesting. Now, I do want to make note that while Mu Qing seems totally different than how he was in the past, Feng Shen is a leader, which I feel like he wasn't really a leader in this flashback, though, because he wasn't the ghost. He didn't take the lead. He stuck back and sat behind Shilian. Even when they were, getting reprimanded later, he always sat behind Shilian, waiting for Shilian to go first. Whereas here, he goes head first into the situation, right? Although I will say I still feel like he's loyal to Shilian. But he knows that Shilian isn't perfect. There is that distinct difference. In the past, Feng Shen was like, no, Shilian's perfect. We'll be loyal to him. He's not going to let us down. And here, he's still loyal to Shilian. I still think he's trying to help him out. But he knows Shilian isn't perfect. And he knows that he shouldn't wait for Shilian to make the first move. He can go in head first if he wants. I like that distinction with Feng Shen now. I like that. So yeah, we have the Goshi. I want to backtrack to him. He seems okay. he can be, it's funny, at times he wants to be somewhat humble, but then he does take pride in the fact that he supposedly has raised Shilian and taught him all this swordsmanship. So the Goshi is rather interesting. I want to make note here that there is the Goshi, and there are 3 disciples. Okay? And he takes credit not for what Shilian does necessarily, but for raising Shilian. Which is fascinating, right? Because if you look at Shilian in comparison as the Goshi Fengshen, when you look at it that way, Fengshen takes, he ends up raising Lan Chanshu in a sense. He's only with him for 5 years, so raising is a soft word. I wouldn't say that hard. But he does take credit for everything that happens at the banquet. Here, this Goshi does not take credit for what happens at the parade. Instead, he takes credit for raising Shilian, where it's kind of reversed in the future. Shilian will take credit for the gilded banquet, but not for Chanshu's actions. That's rather fascinating how that is completely flip-flopped. So yeah, the Goshi, we'll talk about him a little bit later, but he clearly is super devoted and loves Shilian. I would say just as much as Qi Rong. He loves Shilian, right? So we have that. So the parade. The parade apparently has to start on time, and it has to go on for 4 hours. It's supposed to go on for 4 hours, and however many times you can make the procession and you can keep battling at least for 4 hours. However long that takes, that's how many years of good luck you will have, and also how many years you don't have to perform the parade. So this is the first time in 5 years that the parade. So the last parade they establish was when Shilian was 12. So he was not the martial the crown-pleasing martial warrior at that parade. So this is his first parade, and he makes a statement like that, right? So he was 12 and not the martial warrior. Okay. And they have 4 hours to fight. They're supposed to try to fight for 4 hours and see how many laps will indicate how many years of good luck. Which is curious, because what seems to happen is that right after all this takes place, Shilian fights the ghost on the bridge and he ascends, and for 3 years everything's great. And then after the 3rd year, the White Calamity shows up and everything goes all downhill. So it's like a prophecy and a fulfillment of that, right? Which seems rather convenient, though. Seems convenient the White Calamity shows up after 3 years. But I guess maybe that was just the fate of it. We'll see. I'm really excited that we're doing this flashback at this point in time. One, because it's starting from the beginning. We're starting from the very beginning and working our way. If we honestly started from the beginning here and volume 3 was just working our way back to the present with Mu Qing and we don't see Shilian and Mu Qing until volume 4, I'm fine with that, honestly. If we're going to spend the next volume filling in the gaps, fine with me. I'm okay with that, especially with the chapters being... I was worried about this flashback and the chapters not being as exciting. No, they are, because it's MXTX. So I actually am excited for this flashback to learn more about Fengshen and Mu Qing. But I'm glad we're starting at 800 years ago, because I hope we get to see some of the White Calamity. I hope. But knowing MXTX, we're going to flash forward back past that. She'll be like, oh, you already kind of know about that. We'll come back like in volume 6 with it. And I'm like, why? Why? But we'll see. I'm getting ahead of myself. So yeah, it's supposed to be good luck. I like they have everything all in a procession. Again, it's like, if we're doing Disney movies, it's like Aladdin, where it's like Prince Ali, Prince Shan Li. That's literally it. Oh my God, if somebody could do a cover and do Prince Shan Li, da, 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 and just have this like with the golden procession. Can we do that? Can somebody do that? They can sing better than I can. Get on that and I will share it a million times. But yeah, so basically they have this entire elaborate parade set up. You have the warriors. I like the warriors at the beginning symbolize the thorny path of the mortal realm. Like how the mortal realm is so filled with trifles and hardships and struggles. But the idea is that you have the beautiful flower celestial fairies, the virgins come out with the flowers being like, but don't worry, the heavenly officials are going to come and make it all better, right? So we have that, and the carriages of gold, the 16 white stallions pulling the grand float where the battle will take place. Like, spared no expense. And we established that Shanla is a capital of decadence. Like, everything is excessive. Like, the fact that Shilian is wearing 50 pounds worth of robes that are all elaborate and ornate. And then at the very end, what does he do? He has 50 pounds of this beautiful silk ornate clothing. And at the end, he just rips it off. When he still has, Hua Cheng there in his arms, he rips off the fabric like it's nothing. Like that idea of excess, right? The idea, and I'm going to put this up here with Shilian, the idea of excess. So you have Shilian and like taking for granted his wealth. Like the concept, the visual of him ripping off those robes that could have clothed like 60 children, at least gave him a coat, and he just rips it off and throws it to the ground like it was just for this one day alone and that was it. That excess versus our boy Shilian as the scrap collector, who's had the same, Shilian having the same robes for 800 years that he's wore almost like out of piety. Very different. Very, very different. But yeah, like the Grand Stallion's the Grand Float, and then the ghost it's battling with has a 9-foot-long black saber. I wonder if there's any significance with that, but I feel like we'll touch base on it later. But it's this giant 9-foot-long sword, which a 9-foot-long sword is ridiculously huge. I honestly can't wait to see this. I can't wait to see this animated because I'm like, what will this even look like? I just want to see how glorious it is. But everyone forms this riotous mob for Shilian. They want to see the God-pleasing martial warrior. That's the star of the show. The ghost is the big villain, and Mu Qing gets to play the big villain, but the star of the show is Shilian. And that's when we see Qirong. Qirong, or, as we come to find out, he has an actual title, right? His name, he's actually the Prince Shao Jing. Shao Jing is his name. Was his actual title, but he goes by Qirong. That's his official name. All right. We don't see Qirong's parents in this scene. We don't. We see him with the king and queen. So that's curious. I'm curious. Did Qirong's parents die young? Did his father and mother pass away really young and the queen's looking after him? Back in the last set of chapters when Shilian's like, after all my mother did for you, it could be that his parents died. And Qirong, that would add to a lot of things, because one, it would establish why Qirong was so close to the royal family. If his parents had died and his mother's sister, the queen, took him under her wing, being like, well, you're my sister's son, I've got to take you in. Two, it establishes he's an only child. Of course, Qirong is an only child. He has only child syndrome to the max. But also, it establishes why he got away with so much, because the queen probably felt sorry for him. She was like, oh, but he's my nephew. He's all alone. His family's died. We got to be nice to him. He's all I have left on my sister's side of the family. That could very well be it, right? But Qirong, I love that we get the descriptions. I can't wait to see both Qirong young and in like this white blue robe that reading it didn't feel right. Reading it, I was like, oh, that doesn't feel right on Qirong. No, he feels like he needs to be in like greens and sickly colors. Like a nice, pretty jade colored robe doesn't feel right. But I really want to see Shilian's parents animated. I feel like maybe we got them in the original first episode of the Donghua, but I want to see them in more detail in this. They describe Shilian's mother as amiable, pale-skinned, and gracious, and his father as a dignified, handsome man. Which is funny because the whole time I was reading, I felt like Shilian connected to his mother. Like Shilian, like her concern and her being worried very much seemed like how Shilian is when he's worried and concerned in the story. I was like, okay, Shilian's kind of like his mom. He looks seemingly like his father because they describe him as dignified and handsome. So Shilian has his daddy's looks, and his mother's personality. And I'm like, okay. But you know what's funny? The father, the king being described as this dignified, handsome man, reading these chapters, it reminded me of Hua Cheng a little bit. Like, it reminded me of his demeanor and attitude kind of seemed like Hua Cheng a little bit. And I was like, funny that. Isn't that interesting? But the queen being worried, concerned. But the king, and what also reminded me of Hua Cheng was that she gets really worried and concerned that Shilian's not there. And she's like, where can my son be? And it said that the king, he like put his hand over hers and comforted her with a gaze. I just looked at her like, it's going to be okay. And I feel like that ties to both Shilian, because Shilian back in Qirong's cave was like giving Hua Cheng a look being like, it's going to be okay. Chill. There's that. But also ties to Hua Cheng having like this comforting gaze. So there's some connections there, right? But Qirong, oh my God, he is a trash king. The worst, but there's just something about him that I get so excited by when I see him on paper, because even when he's like cursing and being like a little trash princeling, he's still really entertaining to like read. On paper, he's so entertaining. I'm like, I don't know how that's going to translate to Donghua, but he's so entertaining. And he just throws a temper tantrum and then throws a teapot at Mu Ching, who catches it on a sword, because I never thought I want to see a rematch between Mu Ching and Qirong, and Qirong's just throwing teapots and cutlery at Mu Ching, and Mu Ching's batting them away. I want to see this, right? I thought it'd be like Feng Xin versus Qirong, because Feng Xin remembers Qirong as Shilian's guard, but no, Mu Ching's the one that like batted it away. So I do want to make note with that Feng Xin started out as a guard to Shilian, and Mu Ching was a trainee that Shilian valued. I'm going to be curious in the next chapter to see how Shilian deals with Mu Ching, because it seems like, we'll talk about it at the end of chapter 59, but it seems like Mu Ching lied. So I'm curious how Shilian, Feng Xin's probably going to be pissed because Mu Ching lied, but I'm curious to know how Shilian's going to deal with it and why he kept Mu Ching around. But the thing of it is that Feng Xin and Mu Ching are now both heavenly officials. They started from this place of serving Shilian, or being owed a debt to him, to being heavenly officials themselves that don't owe anything to Shilian, seemingly. So yeah. But yeah. And then suddenly Shilian shows up, and Qirong is just so obsessed. He's like, my cousin crown prince. Like, he's just screaming till he's hoarse. Like, just seeing the level of obsession that Qirong has with Shilian, because he's only a few years younger. They established he's like 14 or 15, and Shilian's like 16 or 17. So Qirong is only a couple of years younger than Shilian, but he's just completely idolizing him, completely obsessed. And he's an ultimate fanboy. Qirong is a Shilian fanboy that gets disappointed in him and turns into like the worst commenter ever. So, right? It's like a fan in a fandom, and then Qirong gets disappointed and he just decides to go all against him in the fandom. And it's like, oh my God. Like, I feel like that's somewhat relatable in a lot of ways, I think, to many readers. So, but Shilian jumping from this crazy height, like, it's just nothing. Like, 10 meters. 10 meters is like, that's, like 30 feet. Could have broke a bone, but nope. Lands gracefully. Like, he's totally fine. And the king gives the Goshi credit for setting up this grand entrance. And I did respect the Goshi a little bit for saying, like, oh no, that was not my idea. But then I also thought, I'm like, maybe the Goshi's trying to cover face. Like, if something does happen to Shilian, he's like, remember, it wasn't my idea. But he does take pride saying that Shilian is the way that he is from his training. And the queen says that as well. It's all thanks to your training. And I'm like, curious that indeed. And they say, anytime a story has a line like this, where they say, today will go down in history as the most impressive God-pleasing ceremony, I was like, yeah, it's going to go down in history, all right. Maybe not as the most impressive, and maybe as the most impressive, but also as the last God-pleasing ceremony. Yikes. So yeah, so the match participants, they established the ones playing the ghost and the martial warrior have to be skilled, and their moves have to be calculated and practiced over and over again, because they essentially are doing this for like up to 4 hours nonstop. So finding a way to fight and choreograph something for 4 hours is insanity. But that's the idea. They'll just keep going as long as they can until they get exhausted and they have to end the fight. So yeah, that's the idea. They're going to keep circling till they're exhausted and can't fight anymore. And then however many times they went around the pavilion and everything is how many years of good luck they have and how many years they don't have to do the ceremony. So in the end, it's funny that we have this idea of saving money tied to the lapse as well. We'll touch back on that with the ceremony. We'll touch back on that. I just wanted to write that out before I forget about it. But yeah, so the queen, she does make a note that Mu Qing in her mind, she feels, is as skilled as Feng Shen. But the Goshi is like, oh, I don't know about that. And I felt at that moment when the Goshi was talking about how Feng Shen was stronger than Mu Qing, I feel like the queen was maybe saying, oh, well, this Mu Qing is as strong as Feng Shen. And then the Goshi's like, oh, well, Mu Qing is like a commoner. He can't be as strong as Feng Shen, who was a royal guard, a noble. I feel like that's what the Goshi was getting at, was that there was no way Mu Qing could be as strong because he's only a trainee and he's come from the bottom, whereas Feng Shen seems like he's from nobility and is just family-wise joined into the fray as the guard. That was my take on it. I don't know. But Qi Rong, he's like, well, they are definitely not as strong as Shilian. Again, it's this idea of feeding in to Shilian. It's everybody's obsessed with him. And you can tell in these chapters that when Shilian ascended, everyone was already obsessed with him as a mortal. So the moment he became a heavenly official, like it just became a frenzy, I'm sure, and just got out of hand. And that's why the king and queen had like 8,000 temples built. That's why Shilian got so strong, because he had all this support and devotion to him. He was just one of those people that people are naturally gravitating towards. And it ties back to what the Windmaster said. Be like, look at you, Shilian. You have all these connections. You know all these people. You're friends with everybody. Isn't that something? And that kind of ties to reality a little bit, because there are people out there who are naturally just popular. They are just those people that just naturally people gravitate towards, and they have no trouble making friends, no trouble getting people to lead them. They're just those type of people, and they exist in real life. And then the question is, how is that person going to behave? Are they going to do things for good? Do things for themselves? Do things for evil? What's going to happen with that, right? I mean, you have some people who naturally have that charisma and that ability to manipulate and draw people to their cause, and sometimes they end up becoming benevolent benefactors, and sometimes they become dictators. So it's like, Shilian's just one of those people that naturally has that going for him. And Qi Rong just is obsessed, right? And so as they're talking about this obsession and that Shilian's the strongest, you have the crowd like just looking at the ghost on the float and screaming, fight, fight, kill him, slay the evil. And I thought that tied really interesting, where you have the crowd asking for, as my marker is about to die, asking for violence. The crowd asking for violence versus Qi Rong later asking Shilian for violence. The same fight, fight, kill, kill. It was identical to how the crowd's chanting it to how Qi Rong was chanting it to Shilian in the last chapter. Exactly like it. And I was like, oh, the parallels. And Qi Rong saying, show him how it's done. And it's funny that Qi Rong, in that moment, I was wanting to see if Qi Rong said anything about slaying the ghosts. He doesn't. He says nothing about killing ghosts. He tells him to show him how it's done. So that's curious that Qi Rong is like cheering Shilian on to kill the ghost, and then Qi Rong becomes one. I think that's very curious. What's also curious is Mu Qing in this, because Mu Qing goes all out in this moment. They establish, Shilian says that they are supposed to reserve and only use 1/7 of their power. They're only supposed to use 1/7 of their power. Now, what that would actually look like, I don't know. That's kind of curious, right? But they're only supposed to use 1/7 of their power. But Mu Qing is going all out. He's fighting him with everything he got. So I'm curious what's up with that. if Mu Qing is going to explain to Shilian later why he did that, if Shilian questions him, being like, why were you going all out? I mean, but Shilian doesn't think twice about it. He's like, well, it makes it more exciting. We're going to have to be fighting this whole time, so why not? But then at the very end, they're like already sweating and exhausted. So curious, like, why did Mu Qing go all out? What was the point? But Mu Qing doesn't waver, and he doesn't say anything, and he has the mask on, so he's not able to give an explanation. And so Shilian, he's like, well, okay, fine. I'll fight you. And the curious thing is we have that white light. We have the white light of the giant sword, and Shilian's like long. It seems like a slender sword. Like the sword in this is much more slender, right? But that sword clashing, and there's a white light when there's a clash like that. And it's like, oh! So that's curious, is the white blinding light like there was between Shilian, Hua Cheng, and Lan Chanchu. There's the white blinding light, and the 9-foot saber flies into the pillar of the building next to the wall. Now, the question is, was where the saber struck, was that the same wall that Hua Cheng was on? I don't want to know. I'm just writing this down for my own theorizing. But was that the same? I think it's the same wall. I think that wherever, did Mu Qing inadvertently start this whole story? Is this whole story Mu Qing's fault? Is all of this Mu Qing's fault? Are we going to blame him for everything? Are we? You know what? The funny thing is, oddly enough, in Modao Zushi, without spoiling anything, Hua Cheng, or not Hua Cheng, Cheng, I called him Cheng in Mu Qing, now I realize it's probably pronounced Chong, but Cheng in Modao Zushi kind of inadvertently starts that whole story. So is Mu Qing, a lot of people were saying that Mu Qing and Chong are the same, and Cheng are the same, and I was like, I don't want to know why, I don't want that spoiled for me, obviously, but I'm like, man, if Mu Qing and Cheng both were catalysts for their own stories, fine, okay, but that is kind of crazy though, right? So if Mu Qing, if his saber striking the pillar did cause some kind of like, you know, some kind of either a vibration that caused Hua Cheng to fall off the wall or caused everybody to rush forward to look at the saber and it knocked him off, either way, if it was the same wall that was struck that Hua Cheng fell off of, how about that, right? And so at that point, Shilian, he kind of chuckles. Like, Shilian doesn't think anything about the saber being stuck in the pillar. He's just like, it's like, Mu Qing, you tried, but you lost, right? He takes pride in how good he was as a swordsman and how strong he is. He's like, you tried, Mu Qing, look at you. But at that point, Mu Qing doesn't say anything, but he's silently, like, gripping his fists. So, like, why is Mu Qing mad at Shilian? Is he jealous? What's the deal? There's some kind of reason. It's funny because in both the past and the present, it seems like Mu Qing has an issue with Shilian that is unspoken. There's something going on with Mu Qing and Shilian, and it's hinted at here. It's been hinted at in the present. We just don't know the full extent of it. But I think that's curious that he doesn't say anything. He just watches as Shilian chuckles at him, and he just like grips his robes tighter in that moment. But at that point, Hua Cheng falls from the wall, and Shilian rushes to save him. And just like in episode 1 of the Donghua, I love the description in the book of him looking like a butterfly. I'm like, oh my gosh, are you kidding me? Are you joking? Like a butterfly, huh? Okay. Okay. Like, just, it's MXTX. Because, you know, now Hua Cheng probably looked to Shilian as inspiration, and him seeing Shilian grab him and it looking like a butterfly, Hua Cheng's like, I want 1,000 of those. Like, right? I want to always remember that moment of Shilian saving me. Okay. So then we have chapter 59. And Hua Cheng is described as being 7 or 8 years old. He's describing as looking like he's 7 or 8. So we have Hua Cheng being a 7 or 8-year-old, seemingly injured because he has all the bandages. Injured and poor child. This tiny little creature, as Shilian describes him, versus Shilian, who looks 16 or 17 and is this beautiful prince. It's like Cinderella. It's like Cinderella, where Hua Cheng is Cinderella and Shilian is the prince. It's kind of like that if we're going by Disney movie standards. But yeah, so Hua Cheng, there's a 10-year difference. It's funny to think that Hua Cheng is the youngest, which it's always been that way since the start of the story. But it is, when you see Hua Cheng now with how powerful and kind of dominating he is, it's funny to think that he's technically 10 years younger than Shilian. How about that? Unless he was a ghost already, but I don't think he was. I think he was completely alive as a child in this chapter. I think he's a child that's alive in this, so that's curious. The question is, does Hua Cheng have the human face disease? Is that why he has all the bandages? We've talked about Hua Cheng having this body dysmorphia, so maybe he does have the human face disease, and that's why he keeps covered up with the bandages. Maybe is he patient zero? Is Hua Cheng ground zero the first to get the human face disease? And then it all spreads from there. That would be fascinating if Hua Cheng was the reason, if he was the first one with the human face disease and spread it to people, if that became a thing. But this is 3 years before it gets to be a big deal, so what's up with that? Maybe not. Maybe he has the bandages on for a different reason. I'm assuming that maybe we'll find out as we go through this flashback. But as Shilian lands on the stage, the mask flies off, revealing who he is. So revealing himself to the crowd, and the entire parade is thrown off. So essentially, much like the present, Hua Cheng shows up and all of these grand ceremonies are completely thrown awry. Like, whether Hua Cheng intends for it to not happen or not, everything is thrown awry the moment he shows up. And that's kind of a curious commentary on good luck versus bad luck, because Hua Cheng has established he has a lot of good luck. Now, where he's stolen that from, we don't know. But he's established to have a lot of good luck. And normally, it kind of becomes a matter of perspective, right? Because as a child, him showing up and throwing the entire parade off kilter would be a very big token of bad luck, and it would be seen as ominous. Hua Cheng showing up to the gambler's den or the heavenly realm and having everything go his way, despite it all being chaos and going awry, is seen as good luck for him. So it's curious how that distinction is made, right? But I thought Qirong knew what was up whenever this whole pandemonium starts, because he yells at the people in the parade. He's like, don't you know what to do? Are you guys dense? Like, get it together. Like, that was the one time I think in this entire novel so far I've actively agreed with Qirong. I was like, y'all should have had a plan B in place. Like, if something, I'm like, because y'all expect this parade to go perfectly fine without any hiccups. I'm like, what happens if it rained? What happens if some kid ran out into the street? I guess they assumed he'd get trampled and die and not make a big deal out of it. But, because they kind of said that later. But yeah, I'm like, did you not have like a plan in place in case if there was like one minor detail off? So Qirong telling them, he's like, why don't you guys get it together? I kind of see his point, just a wee bit. But Shilian, we established that Shilian in this, the gold mask flying off was bad for a number of reasons, and we will talk about that here in a minute. But Shilian in the past has not shown his face. He has been literally sheltered. Literally sheltered. He has not shown his face. He has literally been sheltered. And now Shilian is out in the open 24/7. So Shilian goes from being this sheltered crown prince that nobody has seen unless they were behind closed doors deep within the palace or training with him, to him just being out walking the streets of this town being like, I'm your neighborly friendly scrap collector. So it's such a contrast, right? But him not being seen by many could also be tied to the fact that it was a duty. He couldn't be seen by many. He was the crown prince. People aren't worthy of seeing you unless it's special, right? And so Mu Qing, I will give Mu Qing this. Even if this whole entire thing was orchestrated by Mu Qing to go awry, in the moment, Mu Qing saves face. Mu Qing salvages the situation in the moment because him and Shilian instantly work together. He's like, what do I need to do? And Shilian's like, get them all back together. And so Mu Qing goes from like all the crowds, from the horses to the musicians to the ladies, the celestial fairies. And he's like, get it together, pick it up, get it back together. We got this. Come on. Don't cause a riot. Don't let the panic escalate. He gets everything put back together. So I'm glad Mu Qing does that. He gets them back on track. Meanwhile, Shilian is holding this child, little baby Hua Cheng, in his arms. And he's like, don't be scared. And he fights the ghost Mu Ching with Hua Cheng in his arms. And Hua Cheng, of course, is terrified and scared to death. But my thing is, that's such a parallel to Banyu when Hua Cheng is carrying Shilian. It's almost like Shilian's like, oh, don't be scared. Now, the meanings behind both those fights are totally different. For Shilian in this chapter, he's holding Hua Cheng and keeping him off the ground as he fights because, as he says later, he's like, I had no place to put him. If I set him down on the ground, the crowd would probably trample over him and he'd be dead. He's like, I couldn't just let him sit on the float. He might get knocked off by one of us fighting, so I had to hold on to him. So it was a matter of keeping him safe. Whereas with Hua Cheng and Shilian at Banyu, it wasn't necessarily a matter of keeping Shilian safe. It was just that Hua Cheng didn't want him to dirty himself to get on the ground. So that it's so fascinating. I love that. And so Hua Cheng is scared, and Shilian says, nothing's going to hurt you. So no wonder Hua Cheng fell hard and fast, right? This little kid. Now, we don't get the line about if you have nothing to live for, you can devote yourself to me. We don't get anything like that. So what I'm guessing, since we don't see what happened with Hua Cheng at the end of this chapter, we just saw Feng Shen like taking him somewhere for him to get checked out and letting him go. My guess is that Shilian is going to see him again. He's going to see him as a kid again after this chapter, and the kid is going to be like in a state of despair or something, or finally be able to talk to him. And at some point, Shilian is going to give him the speech about living for him. Because he said so in the shrine when they were together, that he told that kid that. So it's going to happen at some point. We just got to wait a little bit longer till we get that point. I can be patient. I can wait, right? So Mu Ching, he fakes the kill. And Qirong and the crowd, they cheer. And they didn't keep the parade going, though, because of Hua Cheng. So I feel like not only have they been going all out, and I don't think they stopped the parade because they were exhausted, but at that moment in the book, Shilian looks down and realizes Hua Cheng is there, and he's like, I can't keep fighting Mu Ching while I'm holding this kid. I can't set the kid down because he'll die by the crowds, so we need to wrap this up so I can get him to the palace and then send him on his way. Get him out of harm's way and then send him off. Right? So I like that in the book, when I went back and reread it, there's a moment where Shilian like looks down and he's like, and then he looks to Mu Ching and he's like, okay, let's wrap this up. So they may not have even realized how many laps around they made. He just knew they had to keep going, that they had to stop from keep going because it was going to put Hua Cheng in danger. So Hua Cheng messing up ceremony rituals, messing it all up, possibly causing the downfall of an entire kingdom. What? Which I'm joking. He's not the entire reason for the downfall, right? Not really. But it's just funny how that all lines up. And then the people, they just rush to the palace trying to see Shilian. They've seen him for the first time. They were like, oh my God, he's hot. And they just want to go find him. And so we have basically the king ordering the guards and people to stop them from entering. But it only works partially well because like they show them like breaking past the guards and busting in. It's just a riot. It's crazy. So basically, the people of Shanla are a little bit cray-cray. But it is funny to see this kingdom like it was 800 years ago and to see it just be so decadent, so excessive, so like materialistic, and the people there being so easily manipulated and just easily like a mob mentality, like everyone there. So it's no wonder when Shanla fell, the rest of the people of Shanla just instantly turned on Shilian on a dime with Qirong fanning the flames. Makes total sense because we've seen in this chapter exactly that they're like that from the start. Nothing changed. They've just always been that way. So Mu Ching and Shilian like rips off all the layers of clothing and he's like, I'm exhausted. That was so hot. I'm so sweaty. And Mu Ching, he does like a, but doesn't say he's tired. He won't admit it. He won't admit that he's tired. He doesn't complain. He just sighs. And then Feng Shen shows up and he's like, who be this child? Why is this kid here? Why'd you save him? And Shilian just giving him head pats, just head patting Hua Cheng, little baby Hua Cheng, just head patting him, being like, well, he's such a tiny little creature. I'm like, oh my God. I'm like, Shilian has no clue that Hua Cheng in the present is the tiny creature that he saved all these years ago. I was like, oh my God, Shilian. And he's like, he would have been trampled to death. He would have got Mufasa if we'd let him down there, right? Can't do that. And he's like, how are you, little guy? I'm like, I just imagine Hua Cheng's like, little guy this, you know? I'm just like, oh my God, Shilian, you have no idea. And so at this point, what I like that MXTX does is that she presents Shilian. He is not the same as he is now. And so it makes all the more sense that Shilian talking to Banyu and talking to Hua Cheng at the shrine, him like lamenting, like, I was such a fool back then. Like, now we see where he's coming from. We're like, oh, Shilian, yeah, you were very different as a young 16-year-old, 17-year-old that didn't know any different. Because what he says is that in the book they talk about he was questioning Hua Cheng, but the moment Hua Cheng couldn't answer him, he lost interest. He was like, well, you're not any fun anymore, okay. And he says, so silly. And in the book, in the actual text, he goes, what a silly child. I'm like, huh. Shilian going from calling Hua Cheng a silly child to later on calling his own actions that of a silly child. Like that self-awareness that develops. Oh, buddy. And so he just basically, he asks Fan Shin, he's like, well, go have somebody check him out and then get him out of here. He goes from that in this chapter to 800 years later, not wanting to leave Hua Cheng's side. And then he doesn't want to scare him. Shilian doesn't want to scare him because Hua Cheng, he doesn't want to leave. The little kid is like just clinging to Shilian, like he's just fixated on him. He's like, you saved me, like from dying. Like he just instantly is like dazzled by him. And everyone in the Holy Pavilion laughs at Hua Cheng. They laugh at how devoted he is. They're like, oh, look at that blind devotion. Everybody that meets Shilian is like that. They instantly become attached to him. And now a little 7-year-old kid's no different. It's like, it's so funny to see that parallel of these people in the pavilion making fun of him, these mortals making fun of his devotion. And then later on, it's like his devotion is going to like shatter the heavenly realms and make the gods quake in their boots. Like, what is this? What is this MXTX? But yeah, Shilian, he's like, he tells Fan Shin, he's like, oh, pick him up properly. He's not trash. So there is that where Shilian's like, he's not a piece of trash. Pick him up properly and take him out. But there is a line that Shilian says that just broke my heart, where he's like, they were like, oh, Hua Cheng, this little kid's just fixated on you. He's obsessed with you. And Shilian says, that won't do. I have my own things to take care of. He's like, go on, go home, little guy. I was like, oh my God. Like Shilian just ushering him away. Like, no time for you. And how different that is from now. How different that is. And the thing of it is that Hua Cheng, I don't know if it's the fact that he was a little kid and he didn't know any different and he didn't think about it, or he was so obsessed in that moment that just went in one ear or out the other, or if Hua Cheng remembered all of that from back in the day and just still accepted him either way. We don't know, right? We don't know. It's so good. So good. It's so good. But yeah. So in front of the Goshi and everybody else, we have the deputies show up. So Fan Shin's like, you're going to get an earful. And that's where I picked up and put this up here, was that we have the Goshi and his 3 deputies side by side. But I want to make note of how this is set up. You have the Goshi, and then you have his 3 deputies, like in a row on either side of him, right? And then you have Mu Qing prostrating himself in front of them, like as if he has to answer to the Goshi and the deputies. Like what were you doing? Why did you fail? What's up? But then you have Shilian, and behind Shilian you have Fan Shin, of course. Shilian is not prostrating himself in front of the Goshi and the deputies. Nah, that's beneath him. He's doing it in front of Junwoo's statue. I love the idea that Shilian has constantly, his entire existence, been used to serving Junwoo. And Hua Cheng's like, why would you want to do that? But yeah, just that visual, right? That he's prostrating himself in front of this golden statue. And so it's funny, he says, Your Highness, and the idea that there being 4 of them is curious. There's being 4 of them, that's interesting to me. And the Goshi is just like, and I love that he's just like, Your Highness, and Shilian's like, present, like, I'm here. Oh my God. And he talks about the history, saying that never once has the grand stage only circled the capital thrice. Thrice. And so the ritual, some years it's been up to 16, some years it's been 5, but here it's only been 3. And the worst part was that the mask toppled off of his face during the middle of the ritual. And so they established the mask is it says, since ancient times, the people of Shanla had believed the spiritual aura of a person resided upon 5 facial features. That the aura of a person is on 5 facial features. Okay, so 5 facial features is where the spirit is. Okay, and so the best must be offered to the heavens. So in the midst of the ceremony, a martial warrior must wear a golden mask to hide their features, because his face can only be appreciated by the gods. Mortals have no rights to see it. So I'm wondering if those 5 facial features, it's like the 5 senses. So you have your ears, you have your tongue for taste, ears for hearing, tongue for taste, your eyes for sight, your nose for smell, and then I guess the face itself, hair, cheeks. I like your chin. There's a 5th feature there. I guess if it's maybe the whole face, but you're supposed to keep it hidden so that mortals can't appreciate it. It's reserved for the heavenly officials. But Shilian doesn't seem very bothered by it. He's like, the Goshi's like, you could have easily circled the capital a minimum of 5 times. 50 with your eyes closed, 100 even, but you killed yourself dead at 3. Like, what are you doing? And Shilian's not worried. He says, if the child had fallen to his death, wouldn't that have been more ominous? Like, wouldn't have been like, if we had like if blood had been spilled on the day of the ceremony, wouldn't that have been just as bad as if I interrupted it? He's like, we did the best we could. We made the show even flashier. Everybody liked it even more. So what's the big deal? He's like, if anything, I helped matters, right? I didn't cause anything wrong. So again, we have Shilian taking blame for all in the present. And in the past, Shilian was much more optimistic in the past. Shilian was not taking any blame. He's like, well, I didn't do anything wrong. If anything, I made things better. Oh, you're just a worrywart. And now, 800 years later, Shilian's like, no, everything's my fault and I'm the worst. It's just, ugh. And the Goshi, he blows up at this and he's like, with so many royal guards, anybody could have caught him. Like, he wouldn't have died. He's like, you could have just marched forward a few steps, performed a little flashier, and nobody would have known he'd even fallen. Like, he wasn't worth the time. But Shilian, he's like, nobody but me could have caught him. Like, I would have been the flashiest. Like, I had to catch him. Otherwise, if anybody else had done it, they would have been dead too. So it's just Shilian being like, I was the one that had to save everybody. The idea of saving the common people. I have to be the one to be the savior in this moment. No one else can do it. Versus now where Shilian's like, no, anybody else could do it. That contrast, y'all. That contrast. His words were confident and self-assured. And the Goshi knew that what he said was true and they couldn't refute it. But seeing him kneel before the statue of God, looking like all was well and nothing was the matter, the Goshi was angry, amused, and proud. He's like, I should be pissed off at you for ruining this whole ceremony and possibly like dooming us to only 3 years of a ceremony, but you being so pious in front of the statue and seeming so godly, how can I be mad at you, Shilian? Oof. And then he says another thing. He's like, you can't change things up right before the start without any warning. His majesties were terrified at the act today. Do you know what would happen if we missed the fortuitous hour? And that's when Shilian's like, well, wait a minute. I thought I'd already asked you for permission. And he's like, when did you ask? And that's when Shilian turns to Mu Ching. So I know this seems like a cliffhanger, but at the time I was more befuddled than anything. But it seems like I'm thinking Mu Ching was supposed to maybe relay a message from Shilian to the Goshi, and it didn't happen. And now that would make sense with the start of the chapter, because Feng Xin's like, where's Shilian? He's like, I was just relaying a message. He'll be there. So Mu Ching didn't lie. He was like, oh no, he'll be there. It'll be fine. You're good. He just didn't give any context. Mu Ching, what a cat. what a cat. Like, it's such a cat move, just being like, it's fine, you'll figure it out later. Maybe there's some details involved. I don't know. Like, just, yeah, so I think that's what happened. I think Shilian told him to tell the Goshi, hey, I've got this great idea. I'm going to jump onto the float. It's going to be really cool. And Muchin's like, oh, yeah, I'll tell him. And then he didn't tell him. So I think that's what happened. But yeah, they basically were establishing that, like, we have to perform this ceremony for every year that counts, and only 3 years count now, so now we have to redo the ceremony all over again. Thanks, Shilian. Like, that's their biggest worry. They were more worried about how much the ceremony would cost than the actual issue. And now we find out that years later, that's the least of their worries. So I don't know if we're going to get the White Calamity in this flashback. I don't know if we're going to do it. I feel like in the next set of chapters, we're going to clear things up with this ceremony, and then maybe Shilian will have some conversations with Hua Cheng's child form. Maybe he'll find the child again. Maybe we see Hua Cheng, like, building the shrine for Shilian and getting the umbrella and stuff gathered up, but I feel like that's after he ascends. So maybe I feel like we're either going to do one of a few things. Either Shilian is going to go and talk with Hua Cheng as a kid in the next set of chapters, and then we'll jump ahead a bit of time, or we'll get more explanation about Muqing and Feng Shen working with Shilian. We'll get more with that. Maybe we'll cut to the ascension on the bridge and him meeting Jun Woo. That would be kind of cool. Are we going to get to the White Calamity in the next set of chapters? I don't know. I don't know what that's going to be like. If Shilian ascends, if it shows us with taking Feng Shen and Muqing with him, I don't know what we're going to get, but I'm actually reading these 2 chapters very, very excited for the flashback. I'm ready for it. At first I was lamenting. I'm like, are we going to do a flashback? I want to see what happens with Shilian now. But I feel like this is the perfect time when Shilian is at his lowest point in the story, about to kill a man that Shirong has possessed. He's at his lowest point emotionally. It feels like the perfect time to go back and retrace our steps and be like, the record scratches and Shilian's like, my name's Shilian. You've been wondering how I got here. And then we go back to the beginning and see how we got here. I'm really excited by that. If we get the White Calamity, I'm going to be like, oh my God. But I don't know if we're getting the White Calamity in this volume. I don't know. The White Calamity terrifies me, so I'm not sure. But in any case, I know these chapters are short, and this is probably not a very long discussion, so I apologize. However, you will be pleased to know that next week I'm going to be reading chapters 60 through 65, and I've already counted. It's like 50 pages. It's a lot! So, it's a very lot. So I'm like, oh my God, there's going to be like a whole bunch of chapters next week, and it's going to be a long discussion, I'm sure. So I'm probably going to record it ahead, so I may not have any comments next week with next week's set of chapters, but I'm traveling for the holidays, so I will probably likely have many more comments for the part after that. So that'll be fine, right? It'll be fine. We'll have lots of comments. When we get into the volume 3, I'll have lots of comments from volume 2 to make up for it. Be fine. So I'm sorry y'all have to wait, but I'm probably going to dive into the next set of chapters soon because I have a feeling it's going to take me a long time to record. I have a feeling it's going to be a lot of discussion, so there's that. But in any case, I'm curious to know your thoughts down below. Please no spoilers, but I hope you all have a wonderful week. Please stay safe, take care, and yeah, I'm going to be back next week with a heaping dose of Heaven Official's Blessing. Bye.